Okay, so I speak a few different languages to varying degrees. I speak like German, somewhat well, and a little bit of French and Spanish. Um, a little bit of Polish. Not really, to any conversational extent, but I do like, I can say a few words in those languages. I could probably even say a few like, words in Japanese, or at least I know a few words. Like I know that the Japanese word for wolf is like okami or something like that. And I could maybe try to pronounce that like okami, something like that. And I might be pronouncing it with the wrong like intonation or whatever. Um, and I'm sure that someone who actually speaks Japanese, whether they're a native speaker or have just studied it, would be able to tell that I don't really know how to pronounce like okami, like how a Japanese person would. Um, German has a few sounds that English doesn't have. It has this U sound. It has this O sound. It has this E like in Z and Boot. And of course, I speak Gothic to extent. It's probably one of the languages I speak the best. I, I do know some Latin and Old English, but in any case, I'm familiar enough with languages to know that some languages have certain sounds that other languages don't have. Well, and that's pretty much universal among languages. So, for example, we have the in English, we have an I distinction. So, a French person is not going to be easily able to pronounce the difference between feet and fit. That's just not something that they can do easily. Um, and if I say hamburger, I don't know exactly how a French person is going to say that, but it's probably going to be something more like hamburger or something like that, where it's not really how we say it. And so you might see on the internet a French person complaining that the way an American or a British person says France or deja vu, deja vu is different how from how would they would say France or deja vu, which would be more like France and deja vu. And I just people don't realize, okay, because the average person um is familiar with like maybe two languages. They have like let's see, they have their native language and they have English. Because the average person doesn't speak English natively, although a lot of people do. So then they're I'll just use a circle tool. That'll be better. And just crap. What? Come on there. Okay, there. So I have my circle tool, and so the average person, they speak English and they speak their native language. Um, and so that both languages will have like some sounds in common and some sounds that only English has and their native language doesn't have. So it'll look like that. Other people, Americans, Australians, New Zealanders, they just speak English and they don't have like English is their native language. So English, I'll just replace this with native language. Um, so let's say this person speaks Chinese or something. So they speak Chinese as All right, second language, native language, second language, and we also have the Chinese learner. So in English native language, Chinese second language, and in both cases, they're aware of the sounds English has. They're aware of the sounds Chinese has, and for example, English might make like a th, a th, uh, f, t, distinguishing. So the is simultaneously different from f, t, and sa, and I need to make this text smaller. It doesn't really fit. English distinguishes between like la and ra. English distinguishes. It can have like more consonants at the ends of words and like more consonant clusters. So maybe like whatever. So we like an example of this would be like sans, and we have this NDS, which would be hard for someone who speaks Chinese to say. And we also have like, for example, like tonal, like this would be hard for an English speaker to say as differently. And another thing might be like, oh, the Chinese has like, you know, what, like I can't remember. I should have chosen a language that I'm more familiar with. I haven't studied Chinese, but in any case, like, Chinese will have sounds that sound like the same to an English speaker, and English has like sounds that'll be either sound the same or be difficult to pronounce. Um, this might be a Japanese thing that the Japanese can't hear the difference between the O and R. I don't know. Maybe Chinese can't either. Sorry. I don't. Let's just change this to Jap Japanese. So um, Japanese does have like a sort of a difference between like different words and how they're like the intonation, but I'm not sure exactly how that works. But let's see what's a good example of something that Japanese has. Japanese has like like a short and long vowel distinction. Let's see. It also has uh, like the intonation I said. But whatever. I feel like you get the point. So we have some monolingual English speakers. We have some people who speak a different language natively, and we have like these English speakers who know like one other language. Um, and then of course you have uh, so we can like draw this as like a probability curve. So uh, here we have uh, one language. So people who speak only one language are here. Most people, I would say, speak like two languages because they have to like speak English as well as their native language or their English and like English speaker, and so then we have like maybe like three languages, not as common as two languages because like I said, a lot of people just speak English, but there are some parts of the world where you have to uh, learn more, and I guess here would be like zero languages. Not that I, I mean, I guess there's a lot of people who speak zero languages because they're like children or whatever. Or, I mean, I know like some people, it's very rare, but they, grow up not, being exposed to people and they're just like, they don't end up learning a language. But that's like, raised by wolves kind of thing. not like something you would expect to be anywhere like that. That would probably be like all the way over there. In any case, the for people here in this section, they might not be aware of just how many sounds there are. Um, and something you have to keep in mind is that, like, to an speaker, the and sound very different. Just like you and oo sound very different from it to a German. And even if a German can, like, hypothetically make a a wa va distinction between wa and va, like, because they know, they like learned English, that distinction isn't going to sound as different to them as someone who speaks English natively. And to, like, reg because even if you, like, speak English as your second language, you're not necessarily speaking it as much as your native language. Um, and I know some people would, like, they speak German natively, but they, watch everything in English. So it depends on the person to what extent they can hear the difference between these two sounds. But it's not, if you're German and you hear, like, these two sounds, you're more likely to think that they're closer together in pronunciation, um, than you would "u" and "oo", "u", "oo". Whereas if you're, like, a native English speaker, these, like, sound identical to you almost, and these are, like, so totally different that you wouldn't even, like, think of confusing them, um, if it wasn't for, like, foreigners who, like, can't make the distinction. And so basically, the problem is people aren't aware enough about how the sounds in, like, other people's languages are, like, different from theirs. So they'll say, like, "Oh, uh, I should have gone into this video with more examples, but um, let's. I'm not trying to, like, be all what's the word, like, uh exoticizing. I'm not sure this is a real name, but let's say it is. Let's say our name is Mbasa, and so your name is Mbasa, and you're come from, some country, let's say in Africa. I'm not saying this is a real name. It might be a real name. I don't know. Um, but you come to America and your name is Mbasa, and you pronounce this in a way where, an English speaker says it like Umbasa or something. That's how they pronounce it. So you might be thinking, well, these Americans are too, like, racist to pronounce, Umbasa right. And uh well, at the same time, they pronounce some, like, they pronounce Dostoevsky, they pronounce it just exactly the same as a Russian would. So why are they learning to pronounce Dostoevsky, but they're not, pronouncing Mbasa? Doesn't make sense, right? Um, but let's say a Russian that are called Dostoevsky, and they come to, like, America, and they're like, oh, why are these Americans, mispronouncing my name Dostoevsky as, some, I don't know how Russian, maybe our pronunciation of it is, like, mostly okay, but if it is, mostly okay, that's because we, like, have these sounds in that order as, like, something we can, say easily. And I'm sure there are, like, differences in how we say Dostoevsky, but I think it's important to, like, keep in mind that, that there are, like, reasons why why someone from, a different country, it's not like they're intentionally being like, "Oh yeah, this name isn't, important to learn how to pronounce." And, there are names that are probably like, more difficult to pronounce. So, and to an extent, as to a certain extent, yeah, there are like some names that could probably easily be pronounced, but people just, don't really put the effort into it. But I would say that even for a name like Dostoevsky, we've probably heard a lot more times than we've heard, some other name. Um, I think so. I've seen a lot of like similar sentiments to this, whether it's like a French person saying like, "Oh, why do you say uh, France as France as opposed to France? That's not how we say it in France." And you know, people just assuming that like, it's just those people not being able to like, put in the effort, and we don't really typically realize how difficult it is for the sounds we have in our native language to, and the phonotactics to be pronounced by someone who doesn't have those like sounds in their native language. So some people say that like names are like this sacred thing that like uh if your name is like let's say your name is Kevin, and you go into like Japan or someplace, and they say your name a like Kevin or something like that. Maybe this is an example because this is mostly okay in Japanese. But if you say like no, 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 you have to say it with the exact intonation, Kevin. So even if it's like this whole like Japanese sentence, and then you have to, as soon as you hit Kevin, you have to switch to like English pronunciation mode, and then you can go back to Japanese. This is a very unnatural thing to do. Um, or I'll take an example of Steven. And so your name is Steven, and you go to Spain, and you're like speaking Spanish with your Spanish friends, and they are talking about you, and they say your name as like they're like, oh, esto es mi amigo Esteban or something like, they're putting this e at the end, and they're not like, they're not going to say like esto es mi amigo, like Steven. They're not going to do that. Um, and this is something to keep in mind when you're learning a language as well. Uh, you know, you, it's better to just call yourself Esteban instead of like like insisting that people call you Steven. And I don't want to like like put people down because they're like it comes off as like racist to them if people mispronounce their name. I get it. But I think we should try to like, I guess, be more like understanding, and also that we should have like realistic expectations, because if you're an American and you're like, oh, well, just say Steven. It's Steven, not S. Steven. There's no E at the beginning, you idiot. That's not how it's pronounced. It's easy. I say it all the time. Steven, Steven, Steven. I don't have a problem saying Steven, but this Spanish speaker, they speak Spanish, and in Spanish you can't have that. You can't have, the st at the beginning of a word. So, and so they say like, España, and not like Spain. They say España with this E, and I. So people are like saying, they're under the idea that like a name is like some sort of sacred thing that like, oh, you have to say it's Steven. My name is not S. Steven, it's just Steven. That's, just a hypothetical example. But if you ask me, a name is not, I don't think names are sacred. I think a name is just a word. It's just a word that refers to a person. So if I draw something, this isn't going to be a very good drawing because I'm doing it quickly. But like, let's say, so here we have uh, what a here we have what a Spanish speaker might say as that's un gato or something like that. So we have un gato, and you call it, no, that's a cat. How dare you call it un gato? It's clearly a cat, not un gato. It's it doesn't make any sense, does it? Like, I call it a cat, you call it un gato. The important thing about these two words is that the person we're speaking to understands what we're talking about. As long as both people understand that we're referring to this thing, then whether we call it un gato or cat doesn't really make too big of a difference. And I think names are the same way. So if I understand that you're talking when you say Esteban or Steven, you're talking about a particular a cat named Steven. We both understand that we're referring to this particular cat, and as long as we both understand that, what we call the cat isn't really important. At least not if you ask me. Um, I hope no one like misinterprets anything I said here. I think people should. I mean, I guess just I don't even know, but like it's very easy to be unaware that your language, you know, the sounds in your language are like impossible to pronounce for someone who speaks a different language unless they spend years and years like trying to hear the difference between the two languages. And that's all I really wanted to say. Although it took me like 23 minutes, but whatever.